The tablet spins around. You just ordered a coffee. It costs $6.50. You didn't sit down. No one brought it to you. You walked to the counter, waited 2 minutes, and picked it up yourself. And now the screen is staring at you. 18%, 20%, 25%, custom. The barista is right there, looking at you. Or maybe they're not, but it feels like they are. The line behind you is growing. Your finger hovers. This is called guilt tipping, and nearly 90% of Americans say it has completely spun out of control. The people who press custom, who type in 15% or close the screen entirely, they are not cheap. They are not heartless. They are not bad people. They just stopped pretending that a number on a screen is a moral obligation. And what happened to them next is worth understanding. 15% used to be the standard. For decades, in America, 15% was the accepted tip for good service at a sit-down restaurant. It was clear, it was fair, it was understood. Then something shifted. Digital payment systems arrived. Tablet screens replaced paper receipts. And suddenly, the suggested tip percentages started climbing. 18%, then 20, then 25, then 30. Not because service got better, not because wages dropped, because the software was designed that way. A 2025 report found that the average tip percentage across restaurants and cafes dropped below 15%, the first time in years. Not because Americans became less generous, because they became more aware. The awareness of what was actually happening. Businesses discovered something powerful. If you put a number on a screen in front of a person, with a timer running and a line forming behind them, most people will press it. Not because they want to, because they feel they have to. This is not generosity. This is engineered shame. And it didn't stop at restaurants. It spread to the coffee counter, where you order on an app and pick up your own drink. It spread to the airport kiosk, where a machine prints your boarding pass. It spread to the self-checkout line at the grocery store, a machine asking you to tip a machine. It spread to the drive-thru window, the food delivery app, the hair salon, the hotel front desk, the oil change shop. Everywhere a screen can be placed, a tip prompt now appears. In 2025, 72% of Americans said they were being asked to tip in more places than 5 years ago. The request became so constant, so inescapable, that people stopped feeling it as a choice and started feeling it as a tax. A hidden tax with no rules, no oversight, and no limit. 3 in 5 Americans now believe that businesses are using customer tips to replace employee salaries entirely, outsourcing their payroll responsibility to the guilt of their own customers. Starbucks generates billions in revenue per quarter. Their CEO earned over $100 million in a single year. And yet somehow, the moral weight of whether a barista can pay rent falls on you, the person who just wanted a coffee, and the 15 seconds you spend staring at a tablet screen. The people who type in 15% or close the screen saw this clearly before most people did. They are not who you think. The image of someone who doesn't tip, or tips the old standard, is often painted as selfish, cheap, someone who doesn't care about workers. But look at who is actually pushing back on tip culture in 2026. It is not the wealthy. The wealthy tip without thinking because 20% of a $300 dinner is nothing to them. They don't even look at the screen. It is the middle class. The people for whom $130 a year in tips they didn't feel right about is real money. The people who are already watching every line of their budget, groceries, rent, gas, utilities, and who look at the tip screen and do the math. Picture someone who goes out for lunch twice a week. Nothing fancy, a sandwich shop, a casual cafe. They tip 15% every time because the person behind the counter is working hard and 15% feels right and honest. Over a year, that is nearly $200 in genuine, chosen appreciation. Now picture the same person being told that 15% is insulting, that they are a bad person for not pressing 20, that their honest, considered tip is now a moral failing. They don't stop tipping. They stop going out. This is what the data shows. When people feel manipulated, they don't give more. They give less, and they come back less often. The guilt tipping system is actively destroying the relationship between customers and the businesses that depend on them. The people who draw the line at 15% tip well for genuine service. A server who refills your water, who remembers your order, who makes the experience better, they receive a generous tip, and they deserve it. Some of these people tip 25% at a sit-down dinner when the service was exceptional because it came from choice. But a coffee counter where you ordered on an app, picked up your own drink, and interacted with no one? A self-checkout kiosk asking for 20%? A fast food drive-thru with a tip prompt? These people draw a line. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. They understand the difference between a tip and a tax, between gratitude and obligation, between choosing to give and being manipulated into giving. And quietly, the data shows that more Americans are drawing the same line every single month. Here is what people say. Workers depend on tips to survive. If you don't tip, you're hurting real people. This is true, and it is also the most uncomfortable part of this conversation. The tipped wage system in America is genuinely broken. In many states, employers are legally allowed to pay tipped workers as little as $2.13 an hour. A federal minimum that hasn't changed since 1991. That number, $2.13, is not a typo. It is a law that has not moved in over 30 years. In states like Georgia, Indiana, and Wyoming, that is the actual base wage for a server. Not $10, not $15, $2.13. Compare this to Canada, Australia, or the United Kingdom, countries where restaurant workers earn a full minimum wage, where tipping exists but is genuinely optional, where a 10% tip is considered generous and a 0% tip is considered normal if no one came to your table. The difference is not that those workers are less deserving. The difference is that their employers pay them. This means the financial well-being of a server, a bartender, a delivery driver, a real person trying to pay rent, depends not on their employer, not on the law, but on the mood and the moral calculations of every customer who walks through the door. That is not the customer's fault. That is a structural failure. The people who never tip over 15% are not the cause of this problem. They are responding to a system that was never designed to be fair. Not to workers and not to customers. The solution is not to tip 30% on a $6 coffee at a counter where no one served you. The solution is wages that don't require tips to be survivable. Until that happens, tipping remains a conversation worth having honestly, without shame, without engineered guilt, and without a tablet screen deciding what kind of person you are. But 20% is the new standard. 15% is insulting now. Who decided that? Not a law, not a union, not a mutual agreement between workers and customers. A software update, a default setting chosen by a payment processing company to maximize revenue. The standard changed not because the work changed, but because someone figured out that moving the default from 15 to 20% generates more money with zero additional labor. You are not obligated to accept a new standard because a screen suggested it. Here is the part no one talks about. The guilt tipping system doesn't just take your money. It takes something else. Every time you press 20% on a counter pickup because you felt watched, you didn't give generously. You gave defensively. And those feel completely different. Genuine generosity comes from choice, from seeing someone work hard and wanting to acknowledge it, from leaving a little extra because the experience was worth it. Defensive tipping comes from fear, from not wanting to be judged, from the discomfort of a screen and a line of people, and a barista who may or may not be looking. The research shows that when people feel manipulated into tipping, they tip less overall, not more. They start avoiding the places that pressure them. They lose trust. The relationship between customer and worker, which should be warm, human, appreciative, becomes transactional and resentful. The people who draw the line at 15%, who tip what they genuinely believe the service deserves, no more and no less, they are not contributing to this resentment. They are refusing to perform it. There is a version of this country where tipping is meaningful again, where 15% at a counter is a genuine act of appreciation, where 25% at a restaurant means the server made your night and you want them to know it. That version requires honesty about what tipping is for, about when it's appropriate, about who is responsible for paying workers a living wage. The people who never tip over 15% are not the villains of this story. They are the ones who refuse to stop asking the questions that needed to be asked. And if you've been drawing that line, quietly, without announcing it, absorbing the discomfort of the spinning tablet and the eyes of the person behind you, you were never wrong. You just knew something most people are only now beginning to admit.